just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone, joined by Ryan Roberts. We are continuing on Edge Week with two more scouting reports. Today being Myles Murphey from Clemson and Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. Two guys that are listed at over 6'5" with some crazy length. But interestingly enough, Ryan, neither of these guys really fit the same role, despite physically not being that far off. I think Foskey's like 260. You got 275 for Myles Murphey, and that weight difference really does say a lot for the differences between these two players, because one's a power profile guy, one is a very versatile chess piece that was used at Notre Dame last season.
Yeah, no, and they're it's interesting, Joe, because like you said, and it's a great intro, very similar body types. I mean, I think that Isaiah Foskey could easily play around 270, 275 like Myles Murphy does. I mean, there's no doubt about that. They both have very similar frames, though, in the fact that they're long-armed, long-legged, just like, I mean, they were made in a lab, man. Like this is what defensive ends on the NFL level are supposed to look like. They look the part, to say the least. And they're both young guys, too. I think that we had, looking through the database, I think we had an official date on Foskey, if I remember correctly, but I can't find it at the moment. Oh, there he is. So Foskey's, even though he's going to go into his fourth year in college, is still only 21 years old, which is a really nice sign. So he was born, October 30th, 2000. So he's still 21. He'll be 22 during the season. So he will still be 22 during draft time. And Myles Murphey is, I think, almost the youngest player we have in the database, man. He's only 20 years old still, obviously, as a true junior. So we're dealing with two young guys that are physically advanced for their ages. And like you said, though, I think they're going to fit much different roles, which I think is the exciting part of today's show. Is we're dealing with two great football players, but two football players that I think are stylistically going to do very different things on the next level.
Yeah, very, very different things. And we're going to go into breaking down both of these guys. Before we do, though, folks, I want to tell you about our partners at BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be the number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's Wimbledon finals, Major League Baseball, and the latest fighting news and next season's NFL early futures. Head to their website today or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE to get that bonus and get into the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Ryan, I'm jumping into Isaiah Foskey, who 6'5", 265, really funny player to watch on film because he's just so freaking long. You had hinted at yesterday that Notre Dame didn't really use him that effectively. Al Golden comes in as the new defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman obviously still is going to have some say in the scheme that is ran for this Notre Dame Fighting Irish defense. But Foskey was used all over the freaking place on this defense because you see him as a stand-up rusher. You see him put his hand in the dirt coming off the edge. But then I was watching I think it was the USC game, and he pops in at middle linebacker, and they're putting him right over the middle of the like on top of the center, either as a blitzer, off the ball as an actual linebacker. And I have to admit, I was not expecting that. And I will say, I think Foskey was actually good enough of a mover in space to play those positions. Now, instinctually, I don't want him playing middle linebacker too often, but I think the ability to do that and to blitz him from any gap on your defense, A gap, B gap, C gap, wherever you want to put him, the ability to do that and then not always have to send him is really effective for a creative defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I mean, for people that don't follow Marcus Freeman or don't follow the stylistic, just defensive system that he's run at Cincinnati and then he ran last year at Notre Dame, they run it's a hybrid 3-man front and 4-man front. So they have their strong side ends, they have their nose, they have their 3 tech, and then they have what they call their viper or their drop ends, however you want to kind of phrase it. So to your point, Joe, Foskey is most of the time in the line of scrimmage because they're playing like a 4-man front to a degree. But then they'll go to a 3-man front where they take that Viper or that drop end and they'll place him back as a stacked linebacker. So it almost becomes like a 3-3 look, right? So they'll use that versatility because, like you said, Foskey can blitz, A gap, B gap, can play a traditional edge spot. He's even dropped into coverage a little bit, which he can do, but I don't know why you would want to do it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there's going to be a time and a place where you have to do it, right? And he's going to be able to drop and it's going to be fine. But I think that you saw when he is asked to just pin his ears back and use his explosiveness and to threaten the outside track, man, he's got legitimate juice. And then what do you think his arm length is? 35 inches, right? Like it's
like
got
36 maybe. Well, so the one note I made on him, Ryan, that I loved, his long arm's deadly because his arms are so freaking long. He doesn't have that same Will Anderson power profile, but he's still pretty freaking strong. And that long arm, and he's quick enough, he's twitchy enough to literally just stick his arm out and then keep riding out an offensive tackle before he gets to the quarterback. Like that ability to do that is really effective. I will say, though, like Will Anderson, he does need to add some more moves, but that long arm, the ability to do that is, I would argue, far deadlier than what Will Anderson can do, bringing it to the next level because his arms are so much longer.
Now, I mean, Foskey has that crazy length and he's a really explosive mover, right? Like you said, twitch. I think that's a perfect way to put it. He's a twitchy dude linearly and explosively in short areas. Like, and he gets to his top speed very quickly, man. I don't think he's the most bendy player of all time, right? Like he's going to win basically based upon getting angles to the quarterback and using that explosiveness to kind of finish at the ball carrier. I don't think he's a guy that's a true edge bender. Like, I don't think that that's traditionally him. But the cool part about him, Joe, is although he's going to be in his 4th year, he's not an experienced player. So like those parts of the game that you're talking about where it's like, let's add move to the arsenal, let's get a little more nuance as a pass rusher, I think those can still come because he went from, for people that don't know, he was only ranked in the 200s as a recruit because he was mostly recruited as a tight end coming out of De La Salle. He did not play much defensive end in high school. Notre Dame was the one school that was like, we want you to come play defensive end. We don't want you to play tight ends. He comes. First year, he just plays special teams. I think he blocked the punt, and he was just kind of on like those coverage units. Didn't really play any defense. Second year, he's just a part-time pass rusher. I think he finished like 2nd on the team in sacks just as like a pure part-time player. Last year was his first year as a full-time contributor. He has like 10 or 11 sacks, right? Like in his first year as the guy for Notre Dame. So all that to say is he hasn't been playing defense that long, man. There is massive upside here, and those tools are nutty. I mean, honestly, does he have the best tools of any edge that you've watched so far? It's possible. I mean, it's some ridiculous stuff, man, from an athleticism, length perspective. When you combine those two things together, Isaiah Foskey has some special traits.
Ryan, you're 100% right there with the traits. I think if you had to perfectly formulate what you want an edge rusher to look like, he has all of those boxes. The actualization of using those traits is not as high as a Will Anderson, why we considered him, and we put the stamp on him saying, this is a generational guy. He's not there yet. It would be a bit aggressive to say that, but there's a reason why the NFL is going to be obsessed with a guy like Foskey. I think even if the production isn't that good this upcoming year for whatever reason, there is still going to be a buy-in for a guy like Isaiah Foskey. Now, I don't think that this is a stylistic comp in the sense where he is the same type of player because Foskey is bigger and longer. This other player is a little bit more powerful and plays the linebacker role a little bit better. But I really do believe that he has the capability to be a Micah Parsons for a team wherever he ends up. Because originally the Dallas Cowboys started out trying to play him at outside linebacker, and then they realized, crap, we got to just put this guy at edge and let him come off the edge. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen at the next level, but the ability to move him from gap to gap and tell him to rush from wherever he is, I don't think his coverage skills are as good or his linebacker skills are as good as Micah Parsons. but he has shades of that, and showing the ability to do that on film. I think a creative defensive coordinator is going to use what Marcus Freeman did and what Al Golden is eventually going to do in their defensive scheme. Probably not as much, but the ability to do that is rare, having done it in college. Not a lot of guys are capable of that.
So it's not really a player comp, it's a usage comp. Like,
Yeah.
you want them to use him in a similar vein to the
Yes.
Dallas Cowboys.
I think it's
use
I
Micah
think
Parsons.
it's very, very capable for a guy like him because he's shown the ability to do it.
Gotcha. Well, I have a comp, Joe. Are you ready for my
Okay.
comp?
Yes.
This is a Notre Dame comp, and it's also a New York Giants comp. Mr.
Tuck,
Justin
Justin
Tuck.
Tuck.
Yeah, man. Hey, Justin Tuck weighed in at the combine 6'5", 268 pounds, and he had vines for arms, and he's incredibly explosive. I think that those parallels make a ton of sense. Tuck was a guy that, again, was not the bendiest rusher of all time, but he had a power profile because he had length, he had physicality, and he had explosiveness, and he had that twitch that you're talking about. And I think he had like 3 seasons in the NFL with double-digit sacks. Like, Justin Tuck was a really good football player.
Dude.
Yeah. Now, he was a dude, man. Here's a hot take. I don't know if this is a hot take, actually, but this might be a hot take. Isaiah Foskey, if he comes out last year, because he was eligible, probably a late first, early second round type of player, right? Like somewhere in that range, I think. Top 40 player, I would say. This year, if he has a nice season and he has even an uptick in just not even production, an uptick in just the quality of player he is and a little more nuance to him, he could be a top 10 pick next year. I think that's my hot take. I don't know if it's hot. I don't know.
I don't think it is.
I remember when I did the show at Irish Breakdown when he decided to go back to school for his 4th year. I kind of made the parallels, and they're different players, so I'm not comparing them as football players. But Aiden Hutchinson was a player that was going to be drafted probably in the 2nd round if he came out. He had an injury, obviously, decides to go back to school. He develops into a top 5 pick. My argument is that Isaiah Foskey could have a similar trajectory, maybe an early 2nd round player, but now could be a top 10 pick. And it's a different kind of conversation because one thing held Aiden Hutchinson back, but the thing that held Isaiah Foskey back is that he's not experienced playing the position. Right.
It's
it's
a refinement issue. It's not a physical issue. And there were physical limitations for Hutchinson. And it also, the big argument with him is that he wasn't really, I think, as dominant as people would have hoped in that year in between when he decided to go back. When he came back and he ended up excelling in that final season. But the refinement thing is the big thing with Foskey.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Hutchinson obviously had a great season for Michigan because he was healthy full time, and he took a big jump as far as the nuance of playing the position because he has traits to work with, obviously. But I think if you put Hutchinson next to Foskey, I don't think it's a hot take to say that Foskey's a much more physically gifted football player than Aiden 100%. Hutchinson, in my opinion. Yeah. So I think that we could be dealing with I wouldn't peg him there right now, but the NFL likes him already. We got a little word on Blesto grades, and they're very high on Isaiah Foskey, it seems, early. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that Isaiah Foskey could be a top 10 pick when it's all said and done.
If Travon Walker can go first overall, and then also if Jermaine Johnson could be considered to be a top 10 pick during the cycle, and I think he would have gone much earlier if it wasn't for that run on receivers that happened in the middle of the first round. If both those guys can be in the conversation after being really trait-based players, I think for the most part, I 100% agree. And right now, I haven't watched probably as many edge guys as you have, but I'm safely saying this is edge 2 for me. Like I'm putting him there physically. He's built like you need him to be. If Aiden Hutchinson could take that next step to become the 2nd overall pick, I think Isaiah Foskey has the ability to. He's probably not going to be the 2nd overall pick because there are actual quarterbacks in this class that are going to get drafted ahead of him. And maybe there's a lot of guys that slide in and it pushes down guys like Foskey and Myles Murphy, who we're going to talk about in a sec.
Yep.
He's still going to be capable of being the 2nd edge and a top 10 pick.
Well, I think overall, I know we're going to get into Murphy next, but out of the 2 guys we're talking about today, I think that both of them have a realistic chance to be that 2nd edge off the board. Like, I think it's very possible in that regard. And Joe, I mean, I'm getting more excited because I thought it was going to be Will Anderson and a bunch of solid, promising young players. But there's some dudes next year in the edge class, man. Like, this is another really good edge group. And we have a guy, I think what was lacking in 2022 was you had a lot of good dudes up top. Like you had Kayvon and you had, Jermaine Johnson, like you mentioned, that goes 26 overall, and you have Aiden Hutchinson and Trayvon Walker, who has traits, and they're all good players, obviously. But I don't know if because I thought Kayvon was close to it, but I don't think that you had a clear elite player at the top of next year's class. You have one now in Will Anderson, and you have other guys I think that could ascend to being those elite type players. So it's a really impressive edge group early on in this week.
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very pissed if come January we're sitting here arguing, is Will Anderson the first overall pick? I'm out. I'm tapping out. I'm taking a vacation.
It's going to happen.
I pray that it doesn't. And actually, I really hope a team that already has a quarterback settled is the one who's picking first overall. I think that would make the draft more entertaining. Like, I hope it's the Jets or something, because that would really make the draft more entertaining if we have an edge rusher. I would like to poop on the parade for the quarterback camp, but
you want to poop on the parade, huh?
Yes,
I like that.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah.
I want to let's get to Myles Murphy, the Clemson edge rusher, much bigger, and we're talking about how different they are physically. I get from him maybe not as twitchy off the line as Foskey, but the thing that popped to me is suddenness with his hands. Power with his hands. He is
power in his hands.
There's a lot of aggressiveness with his hands, and it's like he's swinging. I made this really funny point on Ellerson Smith a couple years ago. I'm not comparing the two, but on the FCS show, I said this to Sean, that it's almost like he's boxing, because he's just swinging his arms like he's trying to throw a punch. And I get a little bit of that mentality with Myles Murphy, because his hands are strong, his hands are powerful, and the reps that he wins are when he's throwing his hands around and he's just knocking off any contact from offensive linemen. He's somebody who I can trust to completely break contact that an offensive lineman has when they connect with the inside of his pads. And he's also strong enough. I watched a play against Iowa State, the second game I watched of him, where he completely tossed the left tackle and made a play on Breece Hall. I haven't seen any of these other guys do that. I see them use nuance and positioning to make plays like that. Instead, Myles Murphy is just sheer out muscling dudes, and I love the power profile that he has.
Yeah, no, this is the kid where alignment versatility for me is going to be a big selling point, because I think that he can do things from a 5 all the way out to a 9 even at times, right? Like, that's not going to be not playing like a 9 tag is not going to be his bread and butter, right? But then you can move him inside, and he's a 3 tech at points. He's a 4 or 4-eye. This is what I think people tried to make Trayvon Walker, to be honest. He's a better player than Trayvon Walker just off the bat, right?
Oh, I agree. And and it's crazy that he's not even going to get drafted anywhere near where Trayvon Walker went.
I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens, man. I think Myles has some crazy traits, man. Because like you said, he's got the length too, 275, 6'5", and he is incredibly powerful. There is just he's only 20 years old, man, and he has got some incredible power.
Strength.
He really does have grown man strength. Like, he's got power in those mitts, man. He's got powerful lower half. He is the one guy where I thought Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse had a good game against him. But every other game I watched, man, he was just a game wrecker. Like, they could not deal with his length inside out. Like, they just couldn't do anything with it. So this kid's not going to be the true outside track kid, but like power profile, long arm, ability to convert speed to power, and then hit some inside moves and moving up and down the line of scrimmage. Myles Murphy has special traits, man. He's going to be a matchup nightmare for some dudes kind of playing up and down the line of scrimmage.
All right, I'm going to do the cancerous thing that you're going to get really upset for me doing. Okay.
Let's do it.
I am my only concern. Actually, not my only. My concern with Myles Murphy, and I don't know why this stood out to me more than anyone else we've done so far.
Am I going to hate this?
I looked at his stats, and I have to say, I think it's a bit concerning that out of the 7 sacks that he had last year, which isn't that much, 14 tackles for loss, decent season, most of his production came against Boston College, Florida State, and UConn. That's where most of his production came from. He had also had 1 sack against Wake Forest and Georgia. But his best games statistically came against Florida State, Boston College, and UConn, which last year were not the
Joe,
pinnacle of talent.
Don't do this, Joe. Don't do this,
But
Joe.
I have to bring this up. It immediately popped out to me because it hasn't happened with anyone else so far. I think that it is a legitimate concern, and I want to go watch some of these other games where he doesn't have this production. I watched Florida State and I watched Iowa State, which he played well in both these games. I think that it says something that if most of your stats come against the crap teams on your schedule, you have to make a note of it. I'm not saying I'm not taking him in the first round, but you have to make a note of it.
Well, yeah, okay. So your point is valid. I hear you. You're talking about the sack production. You're talking about the tackle for loss production.
Mm-hmm.
My point is that disruption is not always quantified by stats. I mean,
Correct.
the kid's just flashing everywhere, man. Like he's causing havoc and he's causing mayhem. And I would also say that he is in a deep rotation on that defensive line. I mean, there are dudes on that defensive line. I've been out on Xavier Thomas over the last couple of years because he just hasn't been the same guy as he was as a freshman. But I watched a couple of games of him late last year, man. He looked like the old Xavier Thomas, right? And then they got Brian Bursey, who's coming back from an injury, who is a dominant player. They have Tyler Davis, who's a good football player. They have KJ Henry, who's a good rotational player at defensive end. And then they have number 7. I forget his name. It's like Jeremiah Mescol or Justin Mescol or something like that. My point is that I think that the production is not going to match the disruption that he causes, man. I think he's special. I really do. I think it's a bona fide top 20 player in next year's class. Okay. I do.
I was less saying I'm out on him and more so saying it's something it's something to monitor. I need to see if he steps up more in these. I do hate though. What really sucks is that we're sitting here. Both of these guys, Foskey and Myles Murphy, are both top 20 picks, but for some reason they weren't used like top 20 picks. Like Will Anderson, without a doubt, was on the field on every down. Like they did not take him off the field. I just wonder why and if they were on the field more, what their impact truly could have been.
And hopefully I think we'll see that more. Definitely from the Notre Dame side of things, from every indicator is that Isaiah Foskey is just going to be on the field, right? Like that's everyone expects that. I think that the tools for me are just tremendous with both players, right? And we're going to be talking about Clemson pretty much the next couple position groups because that front 7 is just silly, insane, to say the least. Like it's just not fair, honestly. And I think sometimes, especially in Clemson's case, when you play with so many good players, you're going to get not overshadowed, but there's going to be production stole from you at times. Like it's going to happen. I mean, it's I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I think that production is going to match eventually the talent that a Myles Murphy has, and I think it's vice versa for Isaiah Foskey. I mean, this is like me watching Joe DeLeone at Rhode Island being like, wow, the only tackle he ever made was against Merrimack or something like that, right?
I didn't make any tackles. I have 2 personal foul penalties, but no tackles as a long snapper. The greatest stat line in college football history.
That's why you're only a 67 grade on PFF or whatever it was, right?
I think it was a 66, but still, I don't know where the hell that grade comes from because I didn't block, I didn't tackle. I don't know where the hell I was. My snaps were great. I don't know.
Did you have a bad snap?
No, I didn't. I didn't have a bad snap, so I don't know what this. Maybe it was from field goal. Maybe it was because I always got bumped around on PAT field goal, but not enough to lead to a block. That's for sure.
I'm going to call PFF and demand that.
Yeah, what the hell, Chris Collinsworth? Fix my goddamn grade. Yeah. I think that's going to wrap us up on Ryan. Next show we are going to be doing. We should have Alex. We will be doing a full position group ranking. Hopefully, I have watched enough guys by then. Alex should. I will go watch guys. Let's see if time permits. Alex definitely will be because we gave a 2-week vacation. Hope you enjoyed it, Alex. At Joe DeLeone, must be nice. At Rise and Draft, at NFL Prospects Pod, and Hack City on YouTube. We'll talk to you later.